Now that we're 7 months into the pandemic, how are your kids doing? Studies show that something called toxic stress is impacting our children's emotional wellness.
I mean, back in March, we thought, okay, we can roll with this. This is going to be a relatively time-limited thing. Like, let's all be resilient. We're going to be good. And then it was sort of like, okay, let's get through the school year and then we'll reset. It'll be summer. And by fall, we'll be back to normal. And here we are 8 months late. This is wearing on us now. And that comes out in many different ways for kids. So if you're a parent and you're like, what is going on with my kid? Like, as time goes on and all of this, they're getting more irritable and more just sort of overreactive or tantruming more or more disrespectful talk or that kind of thing.
We talk about strategies for these pandemic times.
You need to do this for school and be on there for your Zoom meeting, and we got to figure these things out. I think in a big picture sense, we would all be wise as this situation continues to not lose sight of what's going on with our kids on an emotional level. You know, if I feel like my kids are grumpy because their face is in front of a screen the entire day for school, and then their face is in their, smartphone the rest of the time, and I'm getting on them about, you need to do other things, put the phone down.
And about our fears of the pandemic learning gap, about our kids falling behind.
They're going to get behind. This is going to be bad. The older ones, they're saying, oh my gosh, their college resume is not going to look as good. Like, their transcript's not going to be as good. And for the younger ones, they're not going to learn to read, or they're going to have to repeat a grade. I just want to encourage everybody to take a deep breath and slow down with all of that.
In these pandemic times, the nutrition behavior connection is more important now more than ever.
When we make changes to their diet, it's a night and day difference. The behaviors literally disappear.
Aloha mamas, and welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom Room. This show is brought to you by the Maui Mama magazine, and we are here for you, the Maui Mama, to help you to connect and express and share all those things that are on our minds during this pandemic time. Our motto is #share aloha, not corona. I'm Angeline Chu Longshore, and today we're talking about pandemic childhood wellness. We all care about our keiki, and we know that this pandemic is not going away anytime soon. And you know what? Normal routine, we were expecting it to come back, right? Maybe months ago in the very beginning of the pandemic, but it's not coming back. Things are we're just still in it, right? And they're constantly changing. So all those normal go-to activities, that those social things that kind of provide us comfort and our kids comfort, well, we're not really able to do those things as much yet. And as we saw with Lanai, that when there is a case and we do socialize, even just with our families, it can spread, the virus can spread very fast. So we're still in it. It's still serious. We're still in blended learning, or some are 100% still distance learning. There's a lot of tourists coming now, and so we don't know if that will change. We don't know what our weeks ahead are going to look like with more and more tourists coming, but we do know that on the mainland and all actually worldwide, cases are rising. That's why we're focusing on pandemic wellness. And today we're looking at that for our child. So we are super lucky, even though I've heard there's this thought about this collision of seasonal depression and pandemic depression, but #lucky we live Hawaii, lucky we live Maui, because usually we can find somewhere on the island that has some kind of nice weather. We can get in the sun. But speaking of depression and wellness for our families, I saw this study, and this was on the National Institutes of Health website, and it was looking at the potential impacts of COVID on the growth and development of children. The report said that there are not many studies looking at pandemic effects for children in these areas yet. So they collected data from past epidemics and pandemics to look and compare with COVID at the impact of social restrictions, reduced social life, shutdowns, school closures, changes to routine, sleep difficulties, exposure to disharmony at home, excessive screen use, an unhealthy diet, and more. We're experiencing all those things, right? So they found that these experiences create a kind of toxic stress that can lead to loss of brain development, long-term impairment of brain cognition, loss of mental and physical health, and it can even affect the capacity and abilities as our children become working adults. That is so crazy, but it's true. All these things, this toxic environment, this mental toxic environment can lead to that. It can stay with them. So another study that I saw in Spain and Italy of children 3 to 18 years old looked at the effects of the quarantine on their children. More than 85% of parents reported changes in their children's emotions and behaviors, of course. 3/4 had difficulty concentrating. More than half reported boredom. A little less than half reported irritability. 40% restlessness, nervousness for more than a third, loneliness for more than a third, uneasiness for a third, and worries for a third of these in these reports. And, at home, I know that we're looking at our children and we're saying, I don't know, is this normal? Or is this part of a phase that they're in that they're supposed to go through in whatever developmental stage they're in? Well, this is what we're looking at. This is happening worldwide with all of our children worldwide. And this is not normal. And here's one thing you really need to hear about: the relationship between loneliness and mental health problems in healthy children and teens was assessed to see if quarantine and social isolation can predict future mental health problems. The review found that social isolation and loneliness in emotionally healthy people increases the risk of depression for up to 9 years. For up to 9 years. So being socially isolated and lonely can affect a child and even an adult for their risk of depression for up to 9 years. That is serious. And this was not a small study. This review included 63 studies with over 50,000 participants. So what we're experiencing is unprecedented. But what they're looking at are all the different studies in the past that are sort of similar, and we're experiencing even more. There's so much more that we're experiencing. So we're in this stuff that is heavy. It's hard. So if you are having a hard time, if your child's having a hard time, just give yourself some slack, because know that we are all having a hard time in one way or another. Some people might say that it's not a big deal. Well, they're easing by a little bit easier, but it is affecting them. So don't feel bad if you are having a hard time. It is a phase of life this world is in right now. So mamas, I don't mean to add more stress or bad news to you, but there is some good news here. Because studies have found that children who did not have depression, anxiety, and other emotional well-being issues, the reason that what that was because they had more knowledge about how to prevent these issues. So the key here is to pass on that knowledge of how to prevent these things, and we can prevent that from sticking with them or even starting or staying with them for long term. Okay. So that's where we're talking to the perfect person, the perfect guest today. She is an expert on childhood wellness. And then for working parents that need help, here's something for you. There is distance learning and childcare for you, but you may want to act fast. So listen to this. Because the Maui Family YMCA was just granted an extension for childcare services supported by the CARES Act from the Mayor's Office in Maui County, they have limited space available for their distance learning and childcare program now. Registration opens this Thursday, October 29th at 6 p.m. So go on to that website, that link at that time to register to get your space. It is the blended learning program, which is what they're calling it. And it will be at War Memorial Gym in Wailuku, which is where it's being held now. It's available weekly until December 18th, 2020. And it's open to ages 4 through 12, 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. And the weekly rate is only $20. Yes, $20 per week for your child for childcare all day, plus blended distance learning help. And that's because it's being funded by the CARES Act. So we are so thankful to the County of Maui and the Mayor's office. Thank you for making that happen for the YMCA and for us. Okay, ladies, here's something just for you. I just discovered armoire.style. If you're into fashion like me and you like high-end designer clothes, but don't want to pay an arm and a leg for it, and you get tired of your wardrobe quickly, then you'll love armoire.style. It's like having an infinite closet with a stylist to curate a closet just for you. Use this coupon code to get 50% off your first month's wardrobe. You'll be saving me on 1 month's show wardrobe, and you can refer a friend to get $100 off for yourself too. Okay, and today we have actually 2 Actions of Aloha acknowledgements from the Maui Mama community. So this is a Maui Mama who created these posters with the Aloha spirit in mind to keep our community safe. Surprisingly, she's not a graphic designer. She's a local home birth midwife, Missy Chong. She owns zendenmidwifery.com. So the thought occurred to her that maybe the visitors don't know about wearing masks in public and that it's required in Maui County. So she posted this on the Facebook Maui Mommies page, and some other moms saw it, and they volunteered to put them up in different areas of the island. So I love seeing this kind of community spirit. This is what these groups are about. This is what coming together is about. And this is what we can do for each other. Okay, and then here is another super kind Actions of Aloha I saw in the Maui Mommies Facebook group also. So this mama, Kaylin Marie, posted an idea of giving families who are having a hard time financially the pumpkin patch experience at Kula Country Farms. And the mamas, all who saw her post, coordinated to create a fund to connect families who wouldn't be able to afford the cost with those funds, and they could have that experience at Kula Country Farms. So I want you to stay till the end of the show because we will see some of those beautiful pictures that Kula Country Farms has just taken random pictures of many families enjoying that pumpkin patch. Hey, and if you want to donate to the CoronaMama show, I have a new text to donate way that you can do that. So the number is 808-215-4858, 808-215-4858, or you can click on the donation link on the Maui Mama Facebook page where you're watching this show. Click below. All right. And I want to remind you that those who have SNAP and EBT cards, you can get farm fresh produce now from MauiHub.org. And we talked about that last week on last week's show, but I just want to remind you of that in case you didn't see the show. Okay, now back to our pandemic wellness for our keiki. Dr. Nicole Beurkens is a holistic child psychologist, best-selling author, nutritionist, and mom. She's been featured on major network television programs and has been a quoted expert in major newspapers, magazines, and online publications. Dr. Nicole has advanced degrees in psychology, education, nutrition, and she is a former teacher also. She has dedicated the past 22 plus years to providing parents with research-based strategies that get to the root of children's anxiety, attention, mood, and behavior challenges. And so we have a very qualified expert mama to talk about wellness for our children in this pandemic time. So let's bring her into the Zoom room. Aloha, Dr. Nicole. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
So nice to have you here. So tell us about yourself and what you do.
Well, as you said, I'm Dr. Nicole Beurkens. I am a licensed holistic child psychologist in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. So we are already getting chilly here. I will be very jealous of your weather here shortly when we start getting snow in a couple more weeks. But my focus really throughout my career has been on working with children, teens, and young adults who have a variety of developmental disabilities and mental health conditions. So everything from things like ADHD, anxiety, depression, to things like autism, epilepsy, learning disabilities, and all those kinds of issues. And I actually started out as a teacher. That was in my first life. I taught kids elementary through high school, and then went back to school and got a doctorate in clinical psychology because I really became passionate about working with families and supporting parents who were saying to me in the school system, you've got our kids for 6.5 hours a day, but we have them the rest of the time. Help us know what to do. So I really shifted then at that point in my career, about 17 years ago now, to working with families and their children, little ones through young adults. And then several years ago, really got interested in the connection between physical and mental health, and really saw that, particularly the nutrition piece of that, as a very unrecognized, under-addressed issue for kids with brain-based kinds of issues. So went back to school, got another degree in nutrition, and really weave that into my work in psychology and mental health now, with educating children and families and professionals about the link between physical health and nutrition and what's going on with our mental health. So that is, like, in a nutshell, what I do. And I have a fabulous private practice where I work with lots of colleagues here, and we work as a team to serve families in our community and well beyond our community, actually around the world. So that's exciting. And then on the personal side, I'm a mom of 4. I know you have moms listening to this. I get it. I am a mom of 4. My children right now are 14, 17, 18, and 20. So I have a freshman and junior in high school and a freshman and junior in college. So I have been there, done that for many years now with the parenting thing. So I'm excited for us to just have this conversation and talk about all things parenting and whatever else in this really unusual time we are living in.
I know it is such an unusual time, and I feel very fortunate to have you here. I met you through Kieran Kirshner, which is the microbiome show. If you haven't watched that, mamas, go watch the microbiome show, because
He's awesome.
He is, amazing, and you know him, and so that's why we have you here. And it's quite rare to have someone with this background, so holistic. I mean, basically, you can cover everything that has to do with child well-being, from their emotions to their physical well-being. So to me, we're looking at this pandemic as, we're in it. It's not going away. And so I see this as the way to really, really control. What we can control is our own health. I mean, I think that's the best proactive way to be. So I'm doing a whole series on proactive pandemic wellness, and you fit into this so perfectly in addressing children. And I think that's the piece that a lot of parents worry about, but they just don't know what to do. They don't know, they see their kids, they're either crazy acting out or they're not saying anything, and they look like they're fine. And so we have these different spectrums of children, but we are all going through a pandemic. So we are all affected, whether we know it or they show signs or not. So I'm just like, wow, we get to talk to you because you have a practice, you see patients, you have other clinicians in your practice, and you are hearing from them. So tell us what you're hearing, you're seeing, because the mama at home might not know exactly what's going on with her child and the various things that are happening.
Yeah. There's so many concerns that we all have right now for ourselves, for our kids. I mean, back in March, we thought, okay, we can roll with this. This is going to be a relatively time limited thing. Like, let's all be resilient. We're going to be good. And then it was sort of like, okay, let's get through the school year, and then we'll reset. It'll be summer, and by fall, we'll be back to normal. And here we are 8 months later, right? And I think that piece, for families, for parents and kids, settling into that and going, okay, we are well into a new school year now. Most of us are still dealing with a lot of upheaval with the school situation, either doing totally virtual still or hybrid, or if the kids are in school, it's a very different school situation for them. So just, I think over time, what has happened is this wears on us, right? In some ways, we become accustomed to it, and it sort of becomes a new normal, like mask wearing and those kinds of things. I don't hear so many people asking, about that kind of stuff anymore. But now it's more like this is still here. The weight of, we're still dealing with this, with our kids. who we told for many months, like, this is just what we need to do right now. We're all doing our part. It's going to get better. And now, and now they're looking at us and going, hey, it's the fall, and my life still isn't back to normal. I still can't do the things I want to do with my friends, or my preschool is still kind of, weird in how it's operating, or I'm not able to do the things I want to do. And so they're looking to us, and we're not sure what to tell them. We're still struggling with just the adjustment of all of it, and how much longer is this going to go on, because it's been weighing on us too. And for a lot of kids, then what's happening, and when I say kids, I don't just mean little kids, I'm talking through our, teen or even young adult kids, who many of them are back home with us now because of the pandemic. And that's a whole, dynamic that has taken an adjustment for everybody. But I think, it's this idea of, okay, this is wearing on us now. And that comes out in many different ways for kids. As you mentioned, some of them are starting to what we call externalize a lot more. You said those kids who act out, right? So if you're a parent and you're like, what is going on with my kid? Like, as time goes on and all of this, they're getting more irritable and more just sort of overreactive, or tantruming more, or more disrespectful talk, or that kind of thing. Those are our externalizers. They kind of act out based on those uncomfortable feelings of anxiety or disappointment or hurt or whatever it might be. Then we have our internalizers, like you said, those kids who go into themselves, who maybe on the surface, they do everything they need to do, but they kind of go into themselves and they don't let anybody know what's going on. So they may spend a lot more time off on their own, isolated. They may not be making us aware of how they're feeling, but they are also feeling immense amounts of grieving over lost experiences and things in their life, the disappointment, the frustration, all of those pieces. So I think that we need to keep all that on the radar. And, in the midst of us being focused on the practicalities of, like, you need to do this for school and be on there for your Zoom meeting, and we got to figure these things out. I think in a big picture sense, we would all be wise, as this situation continues, to not lose sight of what's going on with our kids on an emotional level, and for our families on a relational level. And I would argue that when we err on the side of focusing more attention there, we really can't go wrong, because focusing on relationship building and focusing on meeting kids where they're at, meeting all of our needs on an emotional level, the benefit of that far outweighs the benefits of making sure all their Zoom assignments are done, or, handling the logistics.
I think that it seems that a lot of adults are used to, sort of conditioned to keep them on task.
Yeah.
And that's what we think we're supposed to do as parents: keep them on task, make sure they do the assignments, and they'll be fine. Well, that's not, in my just sensing and observing, I see that there's so much underlying in their emotional body.
Yeah.
So much underlying that they're holding, and they've been holding their breath, like we have been, like you said. We've been waiting for this to end. And if we as parents aren't sensitive to those things that are, I think of it in here, in the body, that they're dealing with, that's when I see the distancing happen, and either distancing and then acting out, or distancing and turning in and becoming less reachable. And so I scour the mommies groups on Facebook, the Maui Mommies groups. So I see a lot of talk, and there's people who, from teenager age to, and young adult to very young, where they talk about the social emotional being so important, but they just don't really know really how to, because this is just, like we always say, this unprecedented time. It's like, it's so different that they're like, well, what I used to do before, joke around, let's go do this, let's go out, have family time. That's not accessible anymore. All of that. And, so to me, it's like, we're in this time where we really have to really pay attention. So can you tell us how to do what we're talking about doing?
Yeah, I think the point that you raise is a really important one that has been spotlighted for all of us, adults and kids alike, which is that a lot of how we tend to cope, at least in our US culture, or I would even say maybe Western culture, a lot of how we cope is by avoiding and staying busy.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big part of how adults and kids cope with uncomfortable feelings, cope when we're feeling disappointed or hurt or upset or, whatever it might be. So it's exactly as you said, let's go do something. Let's, spend time with friends. Let's go to the store. Let's go get ice cream. Let's go on vacation, right? To get a
Right.
reprieve from our life. And what this has spotlighted for us is that we all need tools beyond just distraction or escape in that way in order to cope, because those things like overnight got taken from us.
Mm-hmm.
And it really has spotlighted what other resources do we have? And I think that this is actually one of the valuable silver linings that can come out of a really challenging time or experience like this, which is it helps us to see where we maybe do have some areas that we can work on. And what a gift to recognize that, wow, the way that I cope or the way that my family copes when things get stressful or distressing for us is just to avoid or distract ourselves. And we're going to need some other tools. And to be able to do that, not only for ourselves, but to give our kids, those tools. And it starts with really just empathizing and being real with our kids. Now, how we do that and how we talk about that and how in depth we get depends on their age, right? That's a different communication with a 3-year-old than it is with a 19-year-old. But it really starts with us all getting on the same page and saying, man, this is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get it. You're frustrated. You know what? I'm feeling frustrated too. I want to hear what you're feeling frustrated about in this. And then as appropriate to share as an adult too, what you're feeling frustrated with, to normalize these uncomfortable feelings during an unusual time, because so often kids especially think that there's something wrong with them or these feelings are not okay to have. And in some families, that's been the standard, right? It's not okay to feel sad. It's not okay to express frustration, but empathizing and realizing that the whole range of emotions, particularly in a time period like this, is absolutely normal. And we need to welcome and express that whole range of emotions. And we need to be okay with it as parents, that if our child is expressing that they are frustrated or angry or disappointed or grieving over something, it can be the initial response to say, oh, cheer up, it'll be okay. Or, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Or, oh, it's not that big a deal. Well, to them it is. And when we do that, what we're really doing is soothing our own discomfort with our child experiencing a difficult or uncomfortable feeling. And so step one in all of this really is for us to get comfortable as parents, as adults in the home, with the full range of emotions that we and our family members are experiencing, and to be open to that and to hold space for that and to say that is 100% okay for you to be feeling that way. And boy, I can relate to that because here's how I'm feeling about this. Now, what we do with those feelings is a separate issue, right? If a kid is feeling hurt or disappointed or angry, and the thing that they're doing with that is lashing out and hitting people or whatever, that we're going to work with. But the feeling itself, step one is acknowledging and expressing and encouraging our kids to share that with us. So sometimes, especially with older kids, if you sit down and say, well, tell me how you feel, that's not going to go anywhere as a conversation, right? So starting out by saying, man, here's how I'm feeling about this thing that happened today. Or boy, you know what I realized is I've really been missing X, Y, or Z thing that I used to do, or I had this frustration. Start out by modeling and sharing something, of your own, and that helps kids to open up. But there's some great simple routines that we can get into, even like around the dinner table or before bed. You can do something like, sometimes we call it a rose and a thorn, sharing something great from the day, something that was positive or a success or that went well. And then a thorn would be something that is a challenge or a difficulty or something that didn't feel as good. And just those little routines, and kids over the age of about 10 or 11 will think that's really hokey at first, and they'll be like, oh, I'm doing this because my mom wants me to do it. But you get into a routine with this, just checking in like that around the dinner table, for example, and kids begin to really look forward to it. And it becomes just this really nice vehicle for being attuned to one another and giving everyone the opportunity to share something for them and for us to connect in that way. So that's just one little simple example of how we can do that first step, which is just expressing and communicating how we're feeling and knowing that that's okay, and just leaving space for that. That's the first part.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's such a nice roadmap. I can see that. And I also want to address that, as you were talking about that, I'm thinking about the mom. Mm-hmm. Typically the mom, the dads are doing their thing too. Yeah. Moms and dads typically have different roles in the family and operate differently in how they deal with problems. So I'm thinking about the mom in particular, and she's hearing all of this, and we're in this pandemic time where everything is changing moment by moment so fast, and we're adjusting and we're doing, and we have our go-tos that we normally do, and obviously they're not working. And so then there's this roadmap that you're giving them, which is wonderful. I also want to acknowledge that a mom can feel super overwhelmed right now with doing anything new because everything's new, everything's changing. And so mamas, I just want to recognize that you might be saying, I can't do one more thing new. This sounds like so amazing. Maybe you can do that, but I can't do that. But I want to say that if you look at where you are right now, and what you're doing is what used to work, and those things are not where we are today. Mm-hmm. So if you hang on to that, it's not going to work anymore. So I just want to acknowledge that we need to realize where we are today, and that this is a place that is hard. And so maybe just the one thing, like Dr. Nicole is saying, like, just pay attention. Maybe just pay attention to your own. I'm thinking of this part. Just pay attention to your own right here. Yep. And then start to slowly think about how you might express that. So like take some steps back if you need to. Because as you're talking about this, Dr. Nicole, I'm feeling like I love it. I know that I can do it. And then I know I don't want to leave out the moms who feel like, that just doesn't work, that I can't even get there. So just the one thing, and then slowly, and like take notes here, because these are golden nuggets of a path that you can do. I know it. And it can be replacing that old thing that was, or that old thing, wherever it was, like put that aside. That really doesn't relate to now. And really be in the present and say, where am I now? What am I feeling now? How can I address that? And then the tone of like what you set for your family, as far as I'm addressing myself now and I'm not running on this old system, will be more relatable to them too. And they'll say, oh, mom's finding her center, or in their own like non-conscious way, they'll say, oh, mom's finding her center. And they can find their center just by seeing you find your center. Sometimes it's not even a verbal. So, it's like, these are all things that we can do. And it's like, just getting on the path. I think, sometimes that baby step is super important. And then Now we know where to go.
Right. And I'm big on people giving themselves and their kids grace and space for where they're at.
Mm.
And so you do need to start as small as you need to start. And pick one thing, identify what's one thing that isn't working. Like, gosh, if I look back on the day, like, where was the biggest issue, or what am I constantly feeling frustration about with my kids, or whatever. And then you say, okay, I'm just going to do something around that. I think, to go back to what we were talking about earlier with at the beginning of the pandemic versus now, it's so funny because at the beginning I was seeing all of this stuff online, like, here's all these charts and systems, and like people were like going to do these amazing things. And I was like, I give it 2 weeks. And sure enough, like, people started out with the best intentions. And if you are that type of mom who is listening, awesome, more power to you. That is beautiful and amazing. And for the rest of you, it can tend to feel demoralizing, or we feel like it's this contest, or like, oh my gosh, I went on Pinterest or I went on Instagram and I saw this thing and I don't have color coded, whatever for my kid. Look, there is no one right way to do this. We're going to talk about some basic principles, that's what we're talking about, some things that are helpful, but you pick and choose what fits with your family culture, what fits with where you're at, what fits with the day. I do this stuff professionally, like, for a living. And that does not mean that I am 100% on my game with my own kids every day, right? Some days we just get through the day and I go, all right, tomorrow's a new day. Like, just try again. Some days we just have those days, and it's okay. And that's why I say that the starting point is really acknowledging all these feelings are normal. If you're feeling really stressed out or really cranky, or feeling like, what's wrong with me that I'm way more irritable or anxious or whatever? Yeah, it's called 8 months of dealing with the uncertainty of, raising kids and having a family in a pandemic. Normalize it for yourself. That might be the one big takeaway from this conversation, right? To go, oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with the circumstances. And I think that that's really important too, whether we're looking at ourselves or at our kids, because I've had many more people. We've had tons of phone calls into the clinic. Oh my gosh, I think my child now has ADHD, and oh, my kid's, having these terrible behaviors. Like, there's something really wrong with him. And when we're talking about, it's like all of this has either started or really exacerbated in the last 6 months or so. And what I'm saying to families is, look, these are normal reactions that kids have to an abnormal situation. This is not normal times that we're living with. And especially when you consider children and parents, if you are in a family where not only has school and social life and those things been disrupted, but work has been majorly disrupted. Maybe you've kept your job, but you're now having to do that totally from home and manage your kids and their schooling from home. Maybe your work has been disrupted where you are now out of work. And so the amount of financial stress and distress has gone through the roof. So many circumstances. And so you go, yeah, it's really normal that we're all feeling these really prickly, uncomfortable things. And even adults begin to say, well, I'm just wondering, like, do I have an anxiety disorder now? Am I depressed? I'm like, it would be really strange if you were a person at this point in this 8 months who was like, oh yeah, I'm good. I haven't had no increased anxiety. My stress level's fine. I would say you're probably dissociating to cope with this,
then
right?
You're ill.
These are normal feelings and normal mood changes, normal things that we experience in an abnormal situation. And I think to just recognize that and give ourselves and our kids grace to go, okay, yeah, I don't like that you're talking back to me more, and I'm frustrated that you're having more temper tantrums, or that we're having more arguments, or whatever it might be. And I also can step back and take a deep breath and recognize where that comes from too, and go, yeah, and hey, for those of us raising preteens and teens, which is you and it's me, teens through young adults in my house, we've got the normal teenageness and
Right.
preteenness that we're dealing with, which again, that's a normal phase of their development. And then we've thrown this pandemic thing on
Right
top
on
of it.
top.
And so, yes. So if you're raising kids in those ages right now and just feeling like, some days I feel like I can't get anything right, or we're just not connecting, just know, hey, this is an extra challenge because the relationship dynamics between children and kids in that age group anyway is challenging. It's supposed to be. It's a
Mm-hmm.
normal part of their development, of that sort of push and pull, like I need you 1 minute, get away from me the next minute. So that's normal. But then this entire situation and the added stress and, just everything. So I think it is important to step back and just normalize it. Now, that doesn't mean that we, shouldn't try to shift some things in ways that would benefit us and our kids. But I think just starting with recognizing that, hey, a lot of this is normal, and it would be weird if you and your kids weren't experiencing some emotional ups and downs at this point.
That is so good to hear. I know a lot of moms need to hear that. I know you out there, moms, some of you really needed to hear that. This is really normal, and we're all going through this.
Yeah.
So, not to expect so much of ourselves and of your child at this time. And you mentioned teens. I feel like that's such a forgotten group in a sense. I mean,
Yeah.
they're sort of off to the side. They can make their own food, they can do the normal things, they can manage basically their emotions, but there's so much that we probably don't know. So, is there anything that you can help to highlight what's going on for them, for the parent who has a teenager that might need some insight?
Yeah, I think it is important to be checking in with them. If you have a teen who is real talkative and communicative about that stuff, sort of puts everything out there, and some are like that, then you're probably aware and having conversations. But many of us, particularly like I have 3 sons, and then my youngest is a daughter. My boys, 2 out of the 3 of them tend to be more reserved, kind of keep it to themselves, just with everything in general. So I've noticed that I need to be more intentional about just connecting with them and saying, hey, okay, first marking period's done with this, full-time virtual thing. I know it hasn't been ideal. Like, I'd love to hear about what were some of the highlights and what are some of the things that are still really frustrating to you. Just opening up the dialogue. And even if they don't have a whole lot to say, what that does is it shows them that you are available and that you want to hear what they have to say, especially in circumstances like this. If parents are feeling really stressed and kids know that, by the time they get to the teen years, especially, many of them will pull back and not share what's going on in their lives or their internal world because they don't want to burden. They're feeling like if I share that, that's creating more of a burden for my parents. And parents go, oh my gosh, no, of course not. I want to hear that. But that is how they think about that is, I don't want to go to my mom with this whole drama that happened on, Snapchat with my friends, because she's already so stressed out about my younger brother and his online school and work and all of that. So they keep it to themselves. And so it is helpful to be intentional if you have kids that are more reserved or not as communicative in that way, to let them know, even just saying, hey, I want to hear about what's going on with you. I know that I know you don't like to share a lot, but boy, it's the, middle of the fall now. I want to hear about what's really stressing you out. Or I want to hear about like, what's the best thing that happened to you this week, and just putting it out there, even if they don't share, just creating that opportunity. And I think that that's important for all kids, but it's especially important with our kids in those preteen and teen and young adult years, because I know that some of your viewers have young adults living back at home. For me, my oldest had moved away to school. We were now in this dynamic of, okay, this is the normal with him. And then campus shut down, everything shut down. And we were back to having 4 kids in the home again. And so the dynamics of that. So I don't want to leave our young adults out of this, because many of them in that 18 to early 20s age range are back at home. And that's a whole nother set of things to navigate too. So I would say, especially for those preteens through young adults, just letting them know that you're there, that you want to hear, and that yes, you may have your own stressors going on, but that doesn't mean that you don't want to hear from them, and that that's important to you. So I think keeping those channels of communication open.
Yeah, I've been noticing just as a mom of a 13-year-old that it's become a different kind of interaction with him from when he was a child, obviously. And so now our conversations, at first there was this adjustment for me to get over the kind of young, like, oh, let's do this, or, and then you see the eye roll, sort of thing. And you're like, okay, that doesn't work anymore. Right. And then, yeah, it's like, okay, mom is like totally dorky or what, that's not even the word for them anymore. I don't even know what they call it. Like, she's a boomer or whatever they want to call it now.
That's right. Yeah. Boomer.
And then I realized that just, like you were saying, expressing something that I had just been through. So with the pandemic, I have been struggling myself. And so, anxiety and just different thoughts. And so every time I have had some kind of, and then I go to the other side of like, and then, oh, here's what I can do. Mm-hmm. I share that little like, oh, because then they're like, oh, they feel what mom is going through, regardless if we tell them. And then they'll say, oh, so that's what's happening. And then they see my process, they get it. And then when I share that, then I say, did you feel anything like that? Then they feel welcomed to say, yeah, or no, or kind of, but more like this. And then you get a whole, like, then it just opens up and you're like, thank you. Like you want that.
Beautiful example. Absolutely. And, a lot of times with kids at those ages, the best conversations happen in the car, which has also gotten taken away, although there are more activities, at least around here, opening up. But that car time where you're not face to face, you're able to sit and, you're driving, they're sitting, but that opens up, a lot of opportunity for that. So finding those times in the home environment, but that was a beautiful example, what you just said there, of modeling your own process. And that really is an important step in helping kids. I had talked about the importance of recognizing and acknowledging and empathizing feelings. Another important step is for us to be managing our own stuff and providing a model of that. If I had a choice, if somebody said to me, for the rest of your career, with working with children, you have to pick one of two options. You can choose interventions and strategies that only focus on the parents, or you can choose interventions and strategies that only focus on the kids. I would hands down pick the parents, because what we know from all of the research in child development, in child mental health, in child behavior, in child learning, everything, is that when parents can manage themselves, when parents can focus on managing their own emotions, their behaviors, can create structure, that parents really are the driving force for change with kids. And so maybe this is helpful in reducing people's overwhelm too. I want you to focus much less on trying to get your kids to do things and much more on what you can do for yourself. So if you're feeling super stressed out, anxious, just overwhelmed, focusing on what you can do to take care of yourself to help bring that back to a more manageable level. That is going to have wonderful benefits and amazing results across the board then with your kids. So, whether that is taking 15 minutes in the evening for yourself, or making sure if exercise is your thing, that you're getting that in, or that you are having some time to do something for you, whatever it is, figuring out how can I take care of that need for myself. And moms especially feel like this is so selfish, right? I should be focusing all of my attention, my energy, my effort on kids. But here's where that doesn't work. When we do that, when we focus all of our energy and attention and emotion outwards on other people, and we deprive ourselves and we deplete ourselves, especially in a situation like this of chronic ongoing stress and overwhelm, then we're not actually good for anyone, because we run ourselves dry and then we don't have anything to give. And so when we find that our kids are having a lot more frustrating behaviors, and there's just a lot more tension and sort of grumbling and animosity, and like the vibe of the home, the vibe of the family is just not feeling great, I want the adults to start with themselves and say, where can I be taking care of myself better? How can I fill my cup so that I can then manage these things better? And it really does start with us. And again, it doesn't have to be anything huge, but it's looking at, where am I depleted? Is there something? Is there one even small thing that I can tweak or, adapt or change in some way to take better care of my own needs, emotionally, relationally, physically? And then that has an overflow effect. So I think that focusing on us as the adults, and then the modeling. When we model healthy coping behaviors and just physically and mentally healthy behaviors for ourselves, guess what? Our kids pick up on that. So when you are, use that beautiful example of saying, oh, here's how I'm feeling. Okay, here's how I can problem solve that, or here's what I can do. Your kids are picking up on that. So when we're stressed and we say, oh, I'm going to, go for a run, or I'm going to take a bubble bath, or I'm going to, call my friend, or whatever it might be, we're modeling for them healthy acknowledgement of what's going on in us and some healthy coping strategies. And that also starts with us. Any mentally or physically healthy behaviors that we want our kids to exhibit has to start with us.
Okay, now I know my kids are excited for Halloween, and yours are probably too. So here we have some Halloween safe ideas. For the little ones, 5 years and younger, the YMCA has some grab and go Halloween craft kits for this year's itty bitty Halloween. In the past, they've had some raging Halloween parties, super cute, but for COVID safety, they created the kits that you can do at home while following along to an instructional video. There's no cost, but you must register for the pickup date. For more information, call Brian Kawamoto or call the Y at 808-242-9007. We love the Y. They are just supporting our community in so many ways. Okay, and then Maui County has 2 free drive-in spooktacular events for Keiki on Saturday, October 31st. It's fun for the whole family with Maui classic cruisers, monsters, witches, zombies, skeletons on roller skates, and more. So you have 2 events to choose from. In Kahului at Keopolani Park behind the MAC from 4:30 to 7 p.m. And then there's the West Maui Drive-Through Trick-or-Treat Monster Maze. The drive-through is a free public event from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the north parking lot structure at the outlets of Maui. And the event will be open to the first 250 vehicles who pre-register for the event. So make sure you pre-register for the event. And we'll have a link below on the Maui Mama magazine Facebook page show notes. So look below for that. And then for Upcountry, Seabury Hall is hosting a drive-through Halloween on their Elonda campus, 6:30 to 9 p.m. Friday, October 30th. So make sure to bring food or cash donation to be given to the Maui Food Bank. Okay, so if you learned here something today and you really like watching these shows, then you might want to donate. So you can text to donate at 808-215-4858, 215-4858. And those donations will go to the software services and all the different things that we have to pay for out of our own pockets to make this show run. Thank you so much. Well, it's the end of the year, or feels like the end of the year, because every time Halloween comes around, I think, okay, this is it. We're nearing the end. And if you have any tidbits for the end of the year season, holiday time, then please let me know. Please let us know on the Maui Mama magazine Facebook page. For now, I will leave you with the beautiful, amazing, cool pictures of Kula Country Farms, all those families enjoying their pumpkin patch. So for now, take care, stay safe, and be well. Aloha.